This is lesson 9 of our Revelation Part 2 study. This week, as we did our lesson, we had a lot to do. You had to go through the chapter studies for chapters 11 through 16, and I hope you were able to do your observation worksheets on those. We also then went into, in day 5, looking up, or throughout the week we did a lot of information about what we're calling the persons. We're not talking about humans necessarily, but the persons that are mentioned in chapters 11 through 16. Now, these same persons might carry over to other chapters. We'll fill in more information later. We're going to confine ourselves to chapters 11 to 16 this week, and we are going to timeline. I don't know if you're excited, but I get excited when we start getting into charts and timelining. But hopefully, we're not going to set everything in stone because we can't know everything yet, but we are going to see what we can. Remember, Revelation Part 2 is primarily there to, our job in this one is to see what this book says. It's the only precept course that doesn't do cross-referencing, because we will do that in parts 3 and parts 4. But we wanted to set very clearly what does Revelation say, and then we'll go elsewhere to fill out and figure out some of the answers. So we're going to be covering a lot. I've gone through like 3 different ways that we can cover this, and I'll come on one. So hopefully we'll get there. We could do a chapter by chapter look. We could do a persons by persons look, but I'm going to stick to a timeline look, and let's see what we can find and what can we put where. But we will be looking at each chapter. So you can get out your homework and have it ready. This is not going to be the only time we look at some of these. And remember, as I say persons, I'm not talking about necessarily humans. I might be talking about humans. We're just talking about personalities might be a way. If you remember, when we went through our overview, even in part 1 and now in part 2, we got to, we went through the 3 subjects, segment divisions, and we've gone over them and over them. We can say them again. They're Revelation chapter 1, verse 19, and there are 3 parts. The first one is, John was to write the things that he had seen, and then the second was things which are, and the third is the things which will take place after these things. And I always do my arrow, because that's how I designate after these things. So, chapter 1 was the things that he had seen, primarily Jesus. Another correction I want to make is, because I sometimes do actually watch the video afterwards, I said, and I have said before, that he saw a vision of Jesus. I want to kind of correct that. How do we know that it wasn't just a vision of Jesus, meaning no substance? How do we know it's not just a vision of Jesus? It's in the text. How about verse 17 of chapter 1?
Saw him.
Yes, and he said, when I saw him, what did John do?
Fell
At his feet. Do you fall at the feet of a vision?
No.
Okay. Then what happened? He laid his right hand upon me. Does a vision lay his right hand upon you? No. He saw Jesus. But I keep saying vision, but I just really mean he saw. His vision saw. But I don't mean to indicate that this was anything else, okay? Other times throughout, when we started looking last week, those are the 3 segment divisions were given. Last week we saw that we were looking at 4 times that John, what was going on with John? 4 times. In the Spirit is the phrase, right? In the first time he went, first time. Yes, first time is when he sees Jesus. And then the events of chapters 2 and 3, which are covered in the R portion of the first part of segment division. But this first time in the Spirit, it's John. He sees Jesus, and then that vision, the things that we are told about Jesus. I keep wanting to say vision again. The description of Jesus is used in chapters 2 and 3 each time he talks to those churches, because it's relevant to the message to that church. A portion of who Jesus is. So that description. And then in chapter 4, as Sandy was saying, he was caught up, or it says, he's told, come up here, and when he goes, the up here is when he gets there, he sees the throne, and he sees the one on the throne, and he sees all of that has to do with heaven, and what's going on there, and personages there. That's the second time he's the beginning of that in the Spirit, but it continues through till the 3rd time, and the 3rd time is where?
17.
17. And in chapter 17, he changes locations, right?
The wilderness.
And he goes into the wilderness, and what does John see as a result of that? First thing, the woman. And she is a harlot, and she's riding on the beast. And then there's more. But from 17, and then when's the last time he's in the Spirit?
21.
21. And that's the place where he sees Jerusalem, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven. And then the rest. So there's a description there of the city and the fact that God and Jesus are going to be in the city and no need. So each time, that's another set of segment divisions that you could write on your at-a-glance chart. Another way that we can view this book in its segments. Not a different book, just a different way of looking at it. So that was what we saw last week, and we're going to continue in that mindset as we look today. We want to figure out where John, what part of time, what part of Revelation he's in, and all that. Remembering from chapters 4 through 22, we're in that segment division of the things that must take place after these things. Okay? So, as we look at all of that, as you take all of that in consideration, we're gonna try to put on our chart some of the things that we also covered. We covered these this week to some extent, but some of this is past as well. We have 3 major sets of events, and how are they designated in the book of Revelation? First, there's the seals. And how many seals are there? 7. Who breaks the seals?
Jesus.
What were those seals on?
Scroll.
A scroll or a book, as sometimes our translation scrolls even better. And I showed you that one week, if you rolled up, and if this was your scroll, and you can see writing on the outside, we would assume there's writing on the inside, maybe you can see down in there and see that, but there would be 7 seals on this, and as each seal was broken, you got to the 7th one, what's going to happen? It's going to open up, and you're going to see everything. Everything's going to be revealed and known. Bless you. And so that's the idea here. And then coming out of that 7th seal is what? Trumpets. And the 7 trumpets. So you have, in the 7th seal, you have the giving of those 7 trumpets. And then you have the blowing of those trumpets that happens, right? At the end of the trumpets, the 7th trumpet, what comes out of the 7 trumpets? 7 bowls, right? So, as I said, if you collapse them down, you go back to all of the trumpets, and all of the bowls are really the 7th seal. And Jesus is 100% responsible for breaking all of those. There's more that we know about those. So that's what we're going to start with on our timeline, is the idea. Just draw yourself a line. Give yourself a little space above and below. But we're going to start with the seals. And we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, we probably need to write seals above it. It might be better because we're going to put a lot of information below it. So these are the seals. And then I'm going to show it like this, indicating it coming out of the 7th seal. Yes?
Linda, would you change? You want to be seen, right?
You can't see this?
You can see the board, can't see you.
That's okay. I don't care
Okay.
if you see me. I really would rather you didn't. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you can number them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And these are the trumpets. And then coming out of the 7th trumpet are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What are we looking at here?
Bowls.
Bowls. And this is just the beginning of a timeline. This is just one way we're going to look at it. There might be other ways in the future. Do you understand what I did up there? Basically showing that coming out of the 7th seal is the 7 trumpets. Coming out of the 7th trumpet are the 7 bowls. We also are showing them as successive, right? Because we established when we worked on those charts for a couple of weeks that these are not the same event that we would put underneath here restated, as some people have looked at them that way. But there are differences in those events. Remember, in the trumpets, there was a fraction used here, a third, and the fraction that was used here was a fourth, right? Which is in a sense, it was a third, yeah, or or was it a fourth and a third? Was it a fourth? Yeah, it was a fourth here and a third there. See, I'm always trying to catch you and see if you're listening. No, I'm joking. It is a third, yes, it's a fourth here, and then basically the idea also is it's increasing. But as I showed last week, if you did a pie, you can see it right here, and you took a fourth out, what's left, if that's the way it's looked at, is still another fourth, or at that point it says a third, so it might have been a third of the original whole. We don't know that exactly. Large amounts is one of the things to look at, and sometimes the entire of something is affected. We saw last week as we looked up a lot of those words, the idea of earthquakes and hail and lightning and thunder involved at different times. We're not going to necessarily see all of that detail up here, although sometimes that's significant and important. Okay, so as we've established this so far, we're now going to put some of our people, personages, or events. And one of the main things we want to start trying to do is, if there is a time phrase, see if we can determine when that fits up here. Okay? And remember, we're sticking to what Revelation says. There's a lot of information that each time, and I do this all the time, so that if y'all don't do this, I think you probably do. I know things, heard things before, read a book, watched a movie or whatever, so we know some numbers, we know some things, but we're going to stick to what Revelation says, and if we can find that number or that idea elsewhere in Scripture, that's for part 3 and part 4. Okay, so if I don't put something up here that you're going to ask me about, understand why. Okay, so we went through, as like I said, as we went through and saw some of these events of the seals do not occur in chapter 11, right? They're happening beforehand, but we're going to talk about it briefly. Where do we find the 6 seals, 6 of the 7 being broken? What chapter? 6. Okay, so you could put a chapter designation up here and, basically say, well, we're going to do more information, but like these 6 are found in chapter 6. Okay? Those 6 seals are broken in chapter 6. That's prior to chapter 11. I'm just stating the obvious. But sometimes the obvious is great to be. But we saw in those 6 seals being broken, again, you saw the horsemen coming out, so you could put those things up here. The first seal was what horse? The white horse, right? The second seal was what horse? The red horse. And then the third seal was the black. And the fourth is the ashen. Okay? We saw a progression of, we saw this, the white horse. The rider, there's a rider on every one of them, so it's not just a horse, but that's how they were distinguished. But the rider on the white horse had a crown, was given a crown, and he kept saying was given. He was given a crown, he had a bow with no arrows. We believe, and he went out conquering and to conquer. It looks like, we think that might look like not war, some other form of conquering. And then as a result of the red horse coming out, he was given a great sword, and it was granted to him to take peace from the earth. What does that sound like? War. That sounds like war, right? But and as Kay pointed out, last week, if there was peace on the earth to be taken, there was peace on the earth. So that might be part of what's going on in that first seal, or at least prior to the second seal. The third seal is the black horse, and what's its rider like?
Scales.
It had the scales, right. And so there was a voice that said, a quart of wheat for a denarius, or whatever the phrase was, and it seemed to indicate high prices, it seemed to indicate inflation, a great source of inflation, or maybe even famine, right? And then it tends to follow war, right? Mm-hmm. So it can be part of this progression. The fourth horse had a rider on it called what?
Death.
Death, and had Hades following. So death and Hades together, it says what about them?
They were given power over a fourth.
Okay, so they were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill.
Authority.
Okay, authority to get to take. Right, and we already saw in the red horse time with the sword being given and the peace being taken that men started fighting against each other. So we see death there. Now we see a percentage. It's high percentage. And then in the fifth seal, we just see the souls under the altar. And in the sixth seal, what do we see?
The moon and the sun.
Okay, so we got moon, the sun and
Black.
I'm gonna say black. It says as black as sackcloth. Moon and it says like blood. There was earthquake and all that, right? And people were trying to hide and say, you know, follow me, hide me from the presence of him. Because there's a phrase here. What happens? What do they say? There's a day mentioned.
That great day of the wrath.
The
wrath
of God has come.
Right. So the great day of their wrath has come. Okay. Oops, sorry. That should all be under 6. Okay. Is this the great day of their wrath, or is it just saying the great day of their wrath has come? They're recognizing, right? So that is significant that they're recognizing that. Then in chapter 7, we have the group of people called the 144,000 sealed. And they're where at this point? On earth, right. They're sealed, and they're sealed with the seal of God on their foreheads. And those are from what people group? Jewish. Very clearly defined. We don't have to make that up. 144,000 at 12,000 from 12 named tribes. Very, very clear. Nothing that we should ever take away from that. There's also the great multitude mentioned, and the great multitude comes out of Great Tribulation.
Yeah.
Yes, the Great Tribulation. The great multitude comes out of the Great Tribulation, and they're seen by John as well. And then in chapter 8, what do we see? The seventh seal is broken. Okay, and so here, that's all in chapter 6, and here you've got chapter 8. We won't always put the chapters up there, but for this one, it'll be good for you to see them and kind of know where you can run back and see them. And hopefully you have a mark. But we have the seventh seal is broken. There was silence in heaven for about half an hour, which was very significant, just the fact because there was so much being heard by John, the worship that was going on, the things that were being said, and all of that account he gave us of what was going on around the throne. And then it says, the 7 angels who stand before God, and the 7 trumpets were given them. So whose angels are these? God's. And then it says 7 trumpets were given them. So you've got 7 angels given 7 trumpets in the 7th seal. And then you've got that angel, that other angel, who took the censer and took fire from the altar and threw it to earth, right? So you've got an angel that threw fire to earth and how all that happened. Then you have these 4 trumpets that are being sounded, right? Okay, in this chapter. So if you want to mark off, these 4 trumpets are all from chapter 8, because that's where we find it. To start out with, that's one thing. As you have the first trumpet sounding, you have
Hell and fire.
yeah, hell and fire mixed with blood thrown to earth, and it says a third of the earth is burned up. And I'm just gonna put earth. It's a third of the trees and all the green grass. But the first trumpet impacts the earth, right? Remember, John is in heaven seeing this, but these are events happening. He sees, you know, the trumpet sounding in heaven. He sees what happens on earth. The second trumpet is what?
Fire.
Right, there's something like a mountain, and it's thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea, what happens? Becomes blood. Not like blood, it says a third of the sea becomes blood. As a result of a third of the sea becoming blood, a third of the creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Yeah, it's massive. Then the third angel sounds. What happens here?
Star falls from heaven.
Right, so we have a star falling from heaven to earth, right? And what?
Third of the rivers of springs.
Okay, so now we've got a third of the rivers, so we've got a third of the rivers and streams, you can write all that. Fresh water is now being impacted. So a third of the rivers and streams, and what happens to them?
Turn bitter.
Bitter, right. The word it also is used is wormwood. And this is, you know, you've got 2/3 of the water sources, okay, but you got a third becoming bitter, and as a result, many men die. So this isn't just bad tasting, or like I was telling you today, my dogs stink and we think they got them into some brackish water or something, because that's the smell that we're smelling. I wouldn't want to drink that water. You know, I would avoid that water if that's the case. And you don't want to be sick by it.
Sounds like typhoid fever or something.
Yeah, it's something that's carried in the waters, and that has happened in the past. You're like typhoid or some other plague that's carried. But no matter what, it's called bitter. Wormwood is the word, and as I've told you before, the word Chernobyl, which is Russian, means wormwood. As just interestingly, what happened when we all know the term Chernobyl, but it was that treatment.
Nuclear.
Thank you, nuclear. I kept wanting to say treatment plant, but yeah, nuclear plant. What did it end up impacting? That's one of the things, right? People died as a result. There was just that poisoning. Okay, now the fourth angel sounds, and what do we see? Okay, so you have a third again, a third of the sun, moon, and stars are impacted, and they're darkened, right?
Yes.
For a third of them. And then it says, there was, what else does he see?
Eagle flying.
Right, so you have an eagle flying in mid-heaven, and he says, whoa, whoa, whoa. And these woes, he links those to the remaining blasts of the trumpets of the three angels who are about to sound. So we would call those trumpets 5, 6, and 7. Those are the three trumpets that haven't sounded yet. And so it's each of those woes. Okay. So moving on to chapter 9, we haven't gotten to 11 yet, so we got to get there. So moving on to chapter 9, we've got the fifth angel sounding, right? And what do we have here? And this is in chapter 9.
Star from heaven fell to the earth.
So you've got another star from heaven falling to earth. And what happens as a result of that?
Key to the bottomless pit.
So he opens the bottomless pit. He has the key to the bottomless pit. He opens the bottomless pit, and what comes out? Something like a locust, yeah. So you've got the bottomless. And it says locust. I said it's like a locust, but it says locust. But when it goes on to describe it, you know, as best we can, it's a locust, but it's not like any locust we've ever seen. And what do locusts, if there is a swarm or a horde, whatever you call them, of locusts, what do they normally do?
Everything.
They eat everything, every green thing, right? Everything inside. They don't care what it is. It's just if it's green, they're going to eat it, right? So they're not necessarily going to do this in the winter time because there's not that much green. So this would be the devastation that a locust would do would be, you know, when the crops are in the fields or when there's harvesting ready or whatever. But they're told don't harm the green grass, right? What are they supposed to do?
Amen.
They're supposed to hurt men for how long?
5 months?
There's a 5-month period in here, and it's a sting like a scorpion sting, because they have like a scorpion type tail. And what group of men are they supposed to impact?
Only kill the men who don't have the seal of God.
Okay, so the people that aren't impacted,
About 144.
right, so you've got here, you've got the 144,000, I didn't put them on here yet, because we didn't know exactly where they fit, but they're not harmed, and I'm gonna put that not harmed. So that means everyone else, anybody that's not in that group, because they're the only ones that we have sealed by God, right? Okay, so and that doesn't mean necessarily every person on the earth is going to get stung, but that might be the case. That means this is really widespread, but we do know this group is protected. So this 144,000 that we saw, where did we see them? Chapter 7, thank you, which is after, so we saw the 144,000, I'm just gonna put them sideways in here. You've got the 144,000 kind of inserted between here and here, because we don't really know. And we have the great multitude that he saw there. We have them here on earth, but we also have them here on earth. They're still on earth here.
Because they're not being harmed.
Because they're not being harmed. It wouldn't have an impact otherwise. Why would you say that? Because they would be gone. But they're still here on earth. You could go into and write down this description, but we're just putting real big highlights on here. The angel over the abyss is, what is his name? Abaddon or Apollyon. And of course you know I'm pronouncing those correctly. That's the best, I phonetically pronounce those. At the end of the 5th trumpet, what does it say? First woe is past. So you've got you could put it, well, I'm gonna put it down here. First woe is past. But you could also have put up here, I'm just gonna put 3 woes. But the first woe is past. And then you have the 6th trumpet sounding. This is also in chapter 9. So 5 and 6 are in chapter 9. So the 6th trumpet sounds, and what do we hear or see or what? There's 4 angels who are born, yes.
To kill 1/3 of mankind.
Right, so you've got 4 angels to kill, what was it, a third, you said?
A third.
A third of mankind. Now, we've got death here by men to men death. We've got in the Ashen Horse, we had death in Hades following, and people are dying. We have a third of the sea creatures and a third of the ships destroyed by the blood of the 2nd trumpet, which if ships are destroyed, chances are people are too. We had a third of the earth burned up, a third of the trees burned up, and all the grass, chances are people got caught in that. I mean, you see the wildfires all the time, and there might be somebody within that. They might have gotten away. And then we have a third of mankind killed. This is a lot. There's a lot already. Can't necessarily keep up with the numbers, or we don't, but we can know this is huge chunks. This is big. Okay. And in this one, there is an army. There is an army of the horsemen. How many are in this army?
200 million.
Okay, 200 million army. And their horses are described, and this is where a third of mankind is killed as a result of this one. And it's from plagues. What are the plagues?
Fire,
Brimstone.
Fire, smoke, and brimstone. Okay, and if we go back and look here, which is the 7th seal, that these trumpets come out of, remember that angel threw fire to the earth. And we see fire here, we see, he threw fire and blood. So we see fire here, we see blood here, we see bitterness and death there. We also have death here, we didn't say that before. We have fire coming out of their mouths here. There's a connection between that picture, that action of that angel throwing fire from the altar of God that's in front of the throne, the altar that when it is the altar of incense, it's a golden altar, and from it the prayers of the saints are pictured as the smoke from that altar, but from that same altar, that fire thrown to earth with blood results in these actions that are taken on earth as part of those trumpets. It's another way that you can see that all of it comes out of. It's all kind of collapsed back down into and comes out of that. So those are the plagues, the fire, smoke, and brimstone that come out of that. And then in chapter 10, you have the strong angel with the little book. John's talking to him. John eats the book. It's sweet in his mouth. It's bitter in his stomach. And he's told to continue writing. We don't want to dismiss chapter 10. There's a very significant time phrase in there. It says, what is it?
The mystery of God is finished.
When?
At 1260 days?
Well, actually
In the days.
in the days of the voice of the seventh angel. So that would be here, right? In the days of the voice of the seventh angel, the mystery of God is finished. Okay. What we know already about the seventh trumpet sounding,
He's opened the bowls.
it opens the bowls. So the mystery of God being finished is part of this bowl thing. This bowl thing going on. That was really, okay, deep. But that's part of it. But it's telling us that in chapter 10. It's a time phrase. It's an idea that we need to grab onto because it's tying it to in the days of the voice of the seventh angel when he is about to sound. The mystery of God is finished. Doesn't mean at that moment everything is known or is concluded. It's saying that in those days, with all that coming out. Okay, now we get to chapter 11. What's the first thing we see in chapter 11?
Measuring rod.
John is giving a measuring rod to measure the temple. Okay, we've looked at this before because from chapter 4 on, we've seen a temple, right? We've seen a description of heaven and the throne and all of that. Is that what John is to measure? Because John is still in the Spirit. He hasn't changed locations. And he was in the Spirit in the 4th chapter. And this is continuing through that time. He's told to measure the temple. What temple is he told to measure? Temple of God. Where? Is it in heaven? How do we know where this is?
Because he's in heaven.
He's in heaven, yes. He's in the Spirit, but he's told to
Leave out the court.
leave out the court, which is outside the temple, and not measure it. Why? It was given to the nations, all right? And what they will do what?
Tread underfoot.
They'll tread underfoot, not just the temple courtyard, but the holy city. For how long? 42 months. Okay, I'm not going to put it up here yet. I want you to hold on to that for just a second. They're going to tread it for 42 months, right? So, I kind of want to like put a sticky note up here because we want to take that one. I don't want to miss it. So I'm gonna write it down here, and then we're gonna move it and put it somewhere possibly. Okay?
Okay.
We Sandy, you were.
Does it say right above it?
I could write above here. Okay. So we've got 42 months. Holy city trodden. Okay, and we're just going to kind of put it like that because it's not necessarily, it's been told us here, but it's not necessarily there. We're just going to hang on to it like it's a sticky note. We're going to move it in a little bit maybe. Okay, but we see if we can establish it. So we know this has got to be a temple where? On earth. Because the nations are going to be given the courtyard and they're going to trample underfoot the holy city for 42 months. What city is this?
Jerusalem.
Okay, how do we know that? Number one, it's called the Holy City. Number two, what's there? The temple.
Temple.
Okay, and it's the temple of God. It's not just Athena's temple that might be somewhere else. It's the temple of God. Okay, so let's just stop for a second and let's think about this. This is John. John that walked with Jesus. John that was part of Jesus' earthly ministry, John that stood and watched as Jesus was not just resurrected and talked to him, but ascended. He stood there and watched, and he was told by the angels, all of them were told, but he was told by the angels, said, why are you looking up? Why are you watching this? Because they watched Jesus leave the earth. They were told he's going to come back, right? That's this John. Okay, he saw all that. It's the same John, because that's this John, that saw Jesus in chapter 1 and responded by falling down almost like a dead man. This is the same John, I'm back and forth, but back during Jesus' earthly ministry, John with his brother James and with Peter, the only three that got to see what event that was very significant.
Moses and
Moses and Elijah standing with Jesus on what we call the Mount of Transfiguration, when Jesus was transfigured. John saw that. He saw the shininess coming out. He saw the glory of God shone from Jesus. Saw him in a more perfect idea of his picture of who he really is, other than just a human that he might have seen him as before. That's this John. But the Jesus, same Jesus, at the time that he sees Jesus in chapter 1 of Revelation, is a Jesus that has been in his earthly ministry. John leaned against him when they would eat. He's that close to that Jesus in his walk. He stood at the foot of the cross while Jesus was being crucified, witnessed everything, saw the resurrected Jesus, saw Jesus as he was ascending. Now he's seeing the glorified Jesus in Revelation 1. Same Jesus, different time, different place and time. That is what he reacted to in Revelation 1. We believe that Revelation was written around what date? 95 AD. The events I just described with the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension are around, we believe, 32, 33 AD. Okay? We're decent at math. So you've got 32, let's say, or 3, and now you've got 95 AD, when we believe Revelation was written. Okay, we're on the side that goes forward. BC goes backwards, but this goes forward. We have an event right here at 70 AD.
Jerusalem destroyed.
Jerusalem is destroyed by General Titus in 70 AD, a historic fact. Okay, not a necessarily biblical set date. It was told that it was going to happen, but this in 70 AD. So where does 70 AD fit with 95 AD? Before. What was not just Jerusalem, but what else was destroyed in 70 AD? The temple. Okay, so the temple was destroyed back here. All right? So in 95 AD, when John is being told this, when John is being told to write this down, and this is the part of things that will take place after these things that he's writing about, he's told to measure a temple that at 95 AD doesn't exist. Okay, so what does that tell us will exist?
A temple.
A temple. Now we're up here at 2015. Is there a temple?
No.
No. So this that he's going to measure still hasn't happened yet. We know this part for sure has not happened yet, right? Okay. Just sometimes that's the reason I like timelines. Sometimes you just have to sit down and think those things through. Okay, so when he's told to measure the temple, he's told, leave out the courtyard. In other words, don't measure that, don't worry about the courtyard, just the temple. And then he says the holy city is going to be trod underfoot for 42 months by the nations. Then the next thing we see is what?
Two witnesses.
Two witnesses. These two witnesses, this is, when you were writing down, this is starting to get into your personages, the things that you were to be writing down. When you looked up and wrote down the things about the two witnesses, notice I added paper into my set because I didn't write it all. You can look at those. Look at verse 3. There's a lot of information in it, and I want to make sure that we see very clearly these two witnesses. Who is speaking? Who is the I? And I will.
John.
No, John is not right. Jesus, thank you. Jesus says, I will grant authority. So who's granting authority? Jesus. He said to my two witnesses. These are Jesus's two witnesses. It's very important to understand that. These are Jesus's two witnesses. And what are they going to do?
Prophesy.
Prophesy for how long? 1,260 days. Again, sticky note somewhere for just a second. Or this one's gonna be a little faster though. For 1,260 days, they're gonna prophesy. They're gonna wear sackcloth. These are all details I hope you wrote down. They're also described as what? 2 olive trees and 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. You can, on your own, if you want, go look that up, but right now we're not moving outside the book of Revelation, so we're just going to hang on to that one. They are 2 lampstands, but the one thing, they stand before the Lord of the earth. Remember, they're Jesus's 2 witnesses. Okay, so they're in his presence and essence is one of the things they're saying, standing before him. And then it says, if anyone desires to harm them, what can they do?
Kill them.
What? How? Fire proceeding out of their mouths to kill anyone that is trying to harm them, that comes against them. And their whole goal in life is not just to kill people, their whole goal is to prophesy, but it looks like people are going to come against them. And it calls them their enemies. Okay, so they're going to have enemies. What else can we know about them? What do they have the power to do? Shut up the sky so that it won't rain during the days of their prophesying. Okay, is that going to get people's attention? Yeah. For 1,260 days, they can shut up the sky. What else can they do? Turn water into blood. What else? Smite the earth with every plague as often as they desire. Okay, I was going to say something, but we haven't gotten there yet. They can impact the whole earth. And that's something that we see later is why there's a problem later. Okay, but it says in verse 7, when they have finished their testimony, how much time has had to have passed? 1,260 days. They have had, because that's their time of prophesying. At the end of that time, what happens? The beast that comes out of the abyss, and that's significant. Don't miss that part. The beast that comes out of the abyss will do what? Make war with them and overcome them and kill them. Okay, so again, if you were flipping pages, I would have gone over to beasts and I would have written that fact down. I would have referenced it as chapter 11, verse 7, and saying that the beast that comes out of the abyss makes war with the 2 witnesses, overcomes them, and kills them. So just for a second, what could nobody do up to that point? Couldn't harm them, couldn't kill them. If someone came at them to harm them, if they were an enemy and they desired to harm them, what could the 2 witnesses do? Kill them. So why couldn't he do it this time? Why couldn't they do it at this time? Time was up is one way of looking at it. And what, Sandy?
Because he's the beast.
Because this was an event that needed to happen is another way of looking at it. All right, so we have at the end of 1,260 days, we have this event, beast coming and killing them. Okay, then it says, the rest of the story about them is, their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city. Which city is this? It's mystically called Sodom and Egypt, but it also tells us where their Lord, who's their Lord? Jesus. Where their Lord was crucified, what city is this? Jerusalem. Okay, so the 2 witnesses for this time are in Jerusalem at the point of their death. I don't know if they traveled over the earth, but it doesn't say. But they have the effect over the whole earth. They can. Anybody that comes against them, but at the time of their death, they're in Jerusalem. And the beast comes and he kills them. And their dead bodies, what happens? They lie in the street for 3.5 days. Okay, they lie in the street for 3.5 days because all these peoples that are named will not let them be buried. And what are these people doing as a result?
Having a party.
They're having a party. Because it says they're giving gifts, they're rejoicing. Why? Because they're dead, and because what could they do to them all that time? They can harm them with all those plagues. So they're glad.
They're thinking all their problems are over.
Right. And who saved them from the 2 witnesses? The beast. The beast that came out of the abyss. Okay? Just put yourself in a moment in that time. If you're an earth dweller at that time, if you're dwelling on the earth, and these 2, prophesied and you didn't like what they had to say. People that tried to come against them were just burned, incinerated on spot. So you might have stood back You know, you might have wanted to say something, but you weren't gonna come at them, or if you're still alive watching this. And then all of a sudden, this personage, this beast comes on the scene and kills the two that nobody could touch. And they're rejoicing that they're dead. The bodies lie in the street for 3.5 days. But what happens after 3.5 days? The breath of God goes in them. God is totally responsible for bringing them back to life. They stand on their feet. They don't just get carried up into heaven. They stand on their feet. The whole world sees this. And then there's a voice. Yeah, what does the voice say?
Come up here.
Come up here. Who else has heard that phrase?
John.
John in chapter 4, verse 1. So they're told, come up here, and they come up and they go up in the cloud, right?
Right.
Yes.
And everybody watches this happen. This is not a hidden event. What's that?
Reminds me of the Martians are coming and they just go up.
Beam me up, Scotty, or whatever. Yeah, so, okay, so you got these two that were seemingly all-powerful. Nothing could stop them. They didn't come on the scene and say, by the way, set your calendar, we've only got 1,260 days. That's probably not how this is going to happen.
No.
But we're told they have 1,260 days. And at the end of that 1,260 days, they're killed. Looks like the end of the story. Everybody's all excited. 3.5 days later. Why 3.5? I have no idea. It's just interesting, significant of numbers. But 3.5 days, but breath comes back into them, they rise on their feet, and they ascend to heaven, and then there's a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell. Which city? Jerusalem. And 7,000 are killed, and the rest are terrified, and give glory to God of heaven. And then it says, the second woe is past. So you've got here, you've got the second, okay, sorry, I've got to get the right one. You've got the second woe is past. At the point of the second woe being past, we have the end of the two witnesses, right? Okay, so we've got the two, I'm just going to put two W's, two witnesses, and they're, I'm just going to say ascend to heaven. Okay, so if this is at the end of their 1,260 days, which direction does the 1,260 days go? This way. Okay, so you have, we're just going to put like a line straight up and down, and I'm just putting an arrow, and I'm going to put 1,260 on it. Okay, going backwards from the point of the second woe being past, the point of the 6th, sorry. Yeah. It's a little cuttywampus down there, but yeah, this is at the end of the 6th trumpet, when the second woe is past, is the same point in time that the two witnesses have stopped. And so time from this point goes backwards to 1,260 days. The reason I don't put it into this arrow, or I don't put a mark somewhere here, is I don't know yet how, like, does that go to here? Or does it start somewhere else? But we know it ends right there. Okay, and what's another way to say 1,260 days?
3.5 years.
3.5 years, 42 months. Okay, so we know the end is here. We know it goes that direction as far as 1,260. We know that much. We can't be dogmatic about anything else. Okay? Like I said, we finally get some numbers on our timeline. Get some ideas. Okay, when the holy city is trodden, we're not quite sure where to put that yet, so we're going to leave it off, but we know there's a period of time. It's the same amount of time as 1,260 days, but we don't know that it's the same time period. Okay?
Peggy,
Yes?
is the mystery of God finished? Is that between 6 and 7, or is that
Pretty
after
much
7?
between. It's going to be fulfilled in the 7 and on. In the days of the 7th trumpet, when he is about to sound, it says, the mystery of God is finished. So it's kind of like the mystery's got to be is going to be finished throughout all of that.
Okay.
So I put it there. I don't have those little slim areas between. Yeah. I would probably put it between if I was putting it on my
That's
chart.
where I have it.
Yeah. It also, you can see it better if it's set apart in that part. Okay. Chapter 12 covers what? 2 signs, right? Where are these 2 signs? The 2 signs are in heaven. The first is a woman. How is she described? Clothed with the sun. The moon is under her feet, and on her head are a crown of 12 stars. Okay? She's with child, she's in labor, and she's in pain. You have to skip over a verse or 2. As she's giving birth to the child, the second sign is what? The dragon, the great red dragon, right? The sign is also in heaven. Remember, a sign is not the thing. The sign is pointing to something. But this is a sign in the heavens. And then you've got another sign in heaven, a great red dragon. He has 7 heads, 10 horns, and on his head are 7 diadems. That's the sign, but we're also going to see the personage of the dragon. And he did what? He swept away a third of the stars with his tail from heaven, and he threw them to the earth. And he stood before the woman who was about to give birth, because what was his desire? To devour the child, right? Then it tells us that she had her child. What was her child? A male child, a son. And how do we know? Because Sandy's already said it's Jesus. How do we know it's Jesus?
He's to rule nations.
He's to rule the nations with a rod of iron, and he was caught up to God and his throne. Okay. When you look at these events, is this one woman? Remember, it's a sign in heaven, a woman. Or is this something, is talking about something else? You think it's Israel, okay. It's talking more about Israel, so it's talking about a broader time frame than like 0 or 1, there's not a 0, but like a 1 AD. We are talking about an event that happens in time with Jesus being born to a woman. But it's really born, the woman being Israel, born into the nation of Israel. And this dragon wants to devour the child. We know that event, right? We know the Christmas account, the birth of Christ account. Herod specifically wanted, as a king, wanted to kill what he was told, that the child, the king of Israel, he wanted to kill that child, and he sent armies. And so some of these are real events that happened, but it wasn't, it's a broader picture of time. But this woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God that she might be nourished for 1,260 days. Got another time phrase we just have to hang on to for a second. And there was a war in heaven between who? Michael and his angels, and the dragon and his angels. Okay, so the dragon has angels, right? And it says the dragon and his angels waged war. So it seems to indicate there is a war. It's between these 2 armies, but it's the dragon and his angels, it looks like, that start this war. Okay, so they wage war. What is the result of this war?
Dragons.
There's no place found in heaven any longer, and the dragon is thrown down. Okay? To earth. And his angels are thrown down with him. Dragon's thrown down to earth. Okay? Then it says, I've heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now, and that's significant, mark that, now, the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down, who accuses them, the brethren, before our God day and night. So within that, let's just stop and think. What is Satan able to do now? And how do I know it's Satan?
He's on earth.
He's on earth as the point he's thrown down. In verse 9, it tells us he's Satan. He deceives the whole world. He's also called the devil and his angel, and he's thrown down. Okay, so that's why I said Satan, because he's been called the dragon up to now. But he's the accuser of the brethren. He accuses the brethren day and night before our God, and that is something that's going on. Okay. But at the point where he's thrown down to earth and no place is found for him in heaven or for his angels any longer, and he's thrown down to earth, that's a different time, isn't it? Okay, so the accusing of the brethren's going on now. There's going to be a point when he's going to be thrown out of heaven. I don't believe that point has happened yet. Do you? Do I have reason to believe it hasn't happened yet? Okay, there's a lot of people that say this part has already happened. Or if you go up to 4, where he swept away a third of the stars and threw those to earth, okay? It's difficult to kind of figure out when those things happened. And it's not things, and I'm going like this because it's like, it's not things we can really grab onto necessarily and say definitively. Yes, Cindy?
Well, it says in 119, which will take place after these things, so that's what this is about.
Okay,
Where we
but the
are.
part about Jesus being born
Right, has happened.
has happened. It's a description of the woman, so we're part of who the woman is. And we're saying we believe that's Israel, not just Mary, who was of Israel, but not just a specific person. But that event did happen, and it happened long prior to 95 AD, to John writing this. But it tells us who this woman is. So when it's talking about the woman, not Mary, that flees to the wilderness for 1260 days, we're talking about Israel, right? Okay, so that's where it's a little tough, but I think Martha was one that said it was Israel. I believe you're right, and we looked at this when we did Daniel, and we'll look at this further when we get to Revelation 3 and 4, parts 3 and 4. But we can look at this and know this isn't necessarily talking about just what happened in like 1 AD, or sometimes we think it's like 2 BC, or whenever that Jesus' birth happened. It's not just that we're talking about. We're talking about a broader picture of who she is. So she's not Mary, because Mary can't have a future fleeing. Mary's a person, because she's dead.
Right.
Okay? But Israel, if the woman is Israel, this can happen to and can impact. Okay? But when it says now the salvation and the power, because the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down, then it says, well, the brethren overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their testimony, and they did not love their life even to death. So this isn't something we're going to put our time on right now, but understand for us as overcomers, because remember the messages of the churches always include overcomers. When we overcome how? By the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. So it's not just, Jesus did this, which is great, and that's how I became his. That's awesome, but I also have to have a testimony. And that's going to be why I would be martyred or killed. Because remember, even though they overcame him, they didn't love their life even to death. Some of them are going to die as a result of their testimony. Overcoming doesn't necessarily mean that you're always rescued out of your earthly circumstances, right? Okay, it's a reminder. Then it says, for this reason. What reason is heaven going to rejoice? What is the reason they're rejoicing? Because the dragon has been thrown out of heaven. So now heaven's free of him.
But he's here on earth. That's not good.
Are you
for
talking
us.
about what we're talking about here, or are you talking about now?
Well, now and,
Right.
so it's not,
No, you're right, Martha. You're right. But I didn't know if you were specifically talking about the events here. Does Satan have the ability to be on earth now?
Yes.
Yes. It is written about in the New Testament. What is he doing? He is a lion, and he's roaming the earth seeking those whom he can and destroy, right? That's what Peter, I think, tells us in one of his epistles. So in Job, if you go all the way back to Job, remember when the sons of God went in to speak to God? Who was with them? The devil, yeah, Satan. And they had a conversation. And as a result of that, Job's life was impacted on earth. But when God said, what have you been doing? He said, I've been roaming around on earth. So you understand that Satan has a role in a realm here, a role in a realm here on earth now, because we lost that in the Garden of Eden. He doesn't have total control and power. He's always within the confines of whatever God will allow him to do. But he's not just in heaven all the time.
So he hasn't been cast from heaven yet?
Right,
Oh.
right. That's what we're seeing here. He has the ability, yes, to impact and be on earth. and his, sorry, I keep wanting to use the word minions, his angels have, and why would we have spiritual warfare? Remember, we're told in Ephesians 6, there's a war in heaven, but it impacts us, doesn't it? If I'm dealing with spiritual warfare here on earth, it might seem like, I was about to point to somebody, it might seem like a human is coming against me, and they are. That's reality. But there's something more going on than just that human coming at me. There is a war in the heavens that we don't see, but it's happening. The principalities, the powers of the air, and all of that are going on. Daniel was impacted. You know, you see these pictures in Scripture that will give us a better idea of kind of like Elisha's servant opened his eyes and he saw the armies on the hills. I always want to have that happen. If I could ask for something. But it's confusing, Martha. I see the confusion on your face. But it is confusing. In Job we see, he can go before God. What else does this tell us he's doing? He's accusing the brethren day and night before God. That's one of his roles as accuser. I love the role of Jesus, who's our advocate. I mean, isn't that awesome? And you've probably had people tell you, it's like being in a courtroom and the prosecuting attorney, being the devil, is saying, I got all this stuff against her. Let me tell you what she just did yesterday. And you have Jesus saying, covered with my blood. Not casually, but just like she's mine. She's mine. That's the defense attorney. Isn't that awesome? And he wins, by the way, the arguments. But at this point in time, this is a different event. At this point in time, after this war in heaven, after he's cast down to earth, there is no place found for him in heaven. He had been there. But at this point, he's cast down to earth. And it says, rejoice, O heaven, and you who dwell in heaven. But he says, woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, and he has great wrath, knowing he only has a short time. And then it says, when the dragon saw he was thrown down to the earth, he went after, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. That woman would be Israel. Okay, so he is persecuting the woman, persecuting Israel. And it says, 2 wings of a great eagle were given to the woman in order that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for times, and half a time from the presence of the serpent. This is a time phrase, time period that's happening. And it says, and the serpent poured water out of his mouth after the woman, so he might cause her to be swept away with a flood. But the earth helped by opening its mouth and drinking up the river that he poured out of his mouth. And as a result of that, as a result of the dragon trying to go after the woman, trying to flood her out, the earth helping, he is enraged, and he turns and goes off and wages war with the rest of her offspring. So hang on to a second. We'll put the 1260 and times and half a time, and I'm just going to put woman because that's associated with a woman. We're going to put it up here on another sticky note. It's the same period of time as 1260 days. Is it the same time as what we've established with the 2 witnesses? We don't know that yet, so just hang on. But it's also the same period of time as 42 months. So we have now 4 time phrases talking about the same thing. Same time, amount of time. Time times a half time, 1260 days, 42 months. Did I say 4? I meant 3. Okay, 3 time phrases. We call that 3.5 years. It's not called that, but we know it's 3.5 years. Okay. Then we've got chapter 13. We have 2 persons that are described here. I decided on mine to separate them. I just put beast, and I put on my chart first beast, and then I put a separate page for the second beast. You could have put them on the same page. I just saw that I was starting to run out of room. So that's what I've got a piece of paper here for. Okay, as you look at the beast in chapter 13, and I think this is, we got to look starting here, the first verse says, the he would refer back to the dragon. That's the last he we've been talking about. The he stood on the sand of the seashore, and he saw the beast coming from where? The sea. The beast came out of the sea. Now remember, we've heard of a beast before, but where did that beast come from? The abyss. Just hang on to that. And it says, it gives a description. 10 horns, 7 heads. On his horns are 10 diadems, indicating diadems are crowns, indicating rule. And on his heads were blasphemous names. What is he known for later that you see in his description? What comes out of his mouth? Blasphemies, right? Okay, do you know what the greatest blasphemy is? I mean, what is the ultimate blasphemy, thing to blaspheme? Blaspheming the Holy Spirit's the unforgivable sin, okay? And Holy Spirit being God, right? So the greatest blasphemy there is a blasphemy against God, right? You can blaspheme me, and I think there is even a reference to, you can say things against me, but that's not as bad, and Jesus even says, you know, you can blaspheme me, but you can't blaspheme the Holy Spirit. I don't get that, by the way. You know, I'm just like, how can you do that? But I think there is a reason, and I'm not going to go into that. But anyway, blaspheming God is the ultimate, right? So what might these things, these names, these blasphemous names be? What would be the greatest thing that you could say about yourself that would be the hugest blasphemy against God? That I'm God. Right? And we've had those. David Koresh said he was Jesus. We've had those. Jim Jones, you know, claimed to be. So that would be a blasphemy, wouldn't it? So these blasphemous names might be, and this is just a might be, saying in some form, I'm God. Right? Certainly, blasphemies against God come out of his mouth, and against his name, and against his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. So you can blaspheme other things, but they're all associated with God. Right? And then it says, but it talks about verse 3, and we need to look at 3, 12, and 14 in chapter 13 for a second, because they're connected and they give us more information. In chapter 13, verse 3, it says, I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. And it amazed the whole earth. Skip to 12. It says, and he, this is the second beast, exercises all authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it worship the first beast whose fatal wound was healed. Okay, skip to 14, and it says at the end of it, he had the wound of the sword and has come to life. So now we know that this beast, the first beast, was killed by a sword and came back to life. That's the fatal wound that was healed. That goes back to 12 and that goes back to 3. If you want to do cross-referencing within this, I put verse 12 and 14 by 3, I put verse 3 and 14 by 12, and I put verse 3 and 12 by 14. Because sometimes you'll have somebody say, it was by a sword, and you're like, I forgot where you got that. Well, here it is, okay? So let's think about this. You've got a beast. He's described 7 heads, 10 horns, or what, I think that's how it goes. Blasphemous names on his heads, 10 diadems. And then it says, on one of these heads, he looked like he was slain, and the fatal wound was healed. But in 14 it says, the sword wound that was a fatal wound, and he came back to life. What does that make you think of? It's not Jesus.
No.
He wasn't killed with a sword, for one thing.
Right.
It's not Jesus, but it's a counterfeit, isn't it?
Right.
Okay? And would the earth be amazed? Okay, this first beast is killed by a sword. Okay, if this is the same beast of chapter 11 that killed the 2 witnesses. Remember? 2 witnesses, nobody could touch them. Beast comes on the scene, beast touches them, beast kills them, if it's the same beast. Now fast forward to 13. That beast is killed somehow by a sword and comes back to life. The 2 witnesses came back to life also, right? You see this counterfeit. Yes, Brenda.
Can I ask what do you envision that to be? The beast, a man or a nation or, can we talk about that now? Or?
We can try to see what we can see. That's a good question. Because we're talking about it as a personage or a person, not necessarily a human, but can it be, should it be, how do we look at this? Is this someone, okay, go to the second beast for a second. What is the second beast's role? He doesn't really protect, but what does he do?
To
To honor, yeah,
Worship.
put all the focus on him, right? He's the little, like the mini-me that's running around. I don't know that he's smaller. It sounds like he's meeker, because it talks about 2 horns like a lamb, but he speaks like a dragon. He speaks with authority, right? What authority is he speaking with? The dragon's beast, and the beast, the beast authority, who got his from the dragon, right? So this beast that the dragon's watching coming out of the sea, the dragon gives that beast his authority, and he gives him great authority. He gives him throne. He gives him power. So the dragon empowers the first beast. The second beast comes along, and the second beast turns all the attention back on the first beast in his presence. Can that be in the presence of a system? Can that be in the presence of a government? It's in the presence of a beast that has been killed and been brought back to life. So what is that? My mind goes a certain direction, Brenda. What does that tell me? Is this a system or is this a person? You don't know. Okay, then hang on to it. What else does this second beast do? He tells people to do what? Worship the beast. That can be a religious system. So we'll hang on to that. But it could be a person. He tells them to do what else? To make an image. Can you make an image of an idea?
No.
Can you make an image of a religious system? No. You're making an image of a beast or a person, right? He's not called person at this point. But he has a mouth and he speaks blasphemous words. He is given authority to act for how long?
42.
Okay, so we got another 42 months up here. But this is with the beast. And you can put like first beast or beast 1, however you want to designate him. I'm just going to say beast. There's another way to designate the second beast. And we see that in chapter 19. It's called the false prophet there. Yes, Sandy?
Well, if this is a person and it has 10 horns and 7 heads, I mean, how can that be?
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, I imagine
Yes,
it
Brenda.
is, in nations.
Right.
Euro, whatever.
Okay, well, let's say
Or
we
countries
take
or-
Prince Charles, because that's somebody we know, right? If you were to describe Prince Charles and all of his titles, what would they include? I don't really know, but we're going to throw some things out there. He's the
Ruler.
Prince of Wales,
Mhm.
and he's a ruler. He's going to be
King.
King of England,
Mhm.
right? So would that be different diadems?
Yes.
Okay, could he have authority in 10 realms?
Yeah.
Could he have been given that through, I don't know,
Birth.
yeah, inheritance or, let's say 10 countries?
That he's worked with.
Put him
Yes,
over
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Could it be that?
Yeah.
There's possibilities. The 7 heads, I'm a daughter, I'm a mother, I'm a wife,
Sure.
I'm a sister, I'm an aunt. That's 7. I'm a friend. I've got names, but it's the same person. I'm the same person. But I kind of have different roles, and sometimes you know this. You walk in, even said earlier how hard it is to, like with Dolly, with her mother, to have changed roles. Or as we see Carolyn and Katie in the care there, it's very difficult, and Sandy and Lynn, it's very difficult to now be making decisions for this person that you still honor and respect, but your roles have somewhat reversed, right? So even in that, those roles can change, but you're like separated out, you're her daughter, but now you're almost her mother. You're definitely her caretaker, right? So we can have those roles. You can go off to work and do one thing and basically take off that outfit when you walk in the door, be Mr. Rogers. Let's take off the jacket and let's hang it up. Let's put the sweater on, become Mr. Rogers. Whatever, those are possibles. I don't know exactly what it means, but it's definitely there for a reason. If for instance, it came down to what I was saying, possibly, let's say these 10 horns and on them are 10 diadems. Let's say someday this person, if it is a person, comes on the scene, and there's this group of 10 countries that suddenly make them head of them, where they had their own individual realms, but they're willing to put him at the head of that. Be something like that. But we do know for sure, those are the we don't knows, we do know for sure the dragon gives him a throne, so he has a throne. The dragon gives him great authority, the dragon gives him great power. As a part of that power, as a result of that, whatever anybody is worshiping the beast, they also worship the dragon. And he causes that. But down the line, you've got this second beast, who's causing everyone to worship the first beast, which is ultimately worshiping the dragon. And he speaks like a dragon, which sounds like he's speaking with the authority of the dragon, but he's definitely empowered with the authority of the first beast. And he does these things in the presence of the first beast. Okay, so there's two that you can see at the same time. It's not a beast image. It's not just a beast authority. There is a second beast. And he causes people to worship the first beast. He tells the people to build an image of the first beast. He causes them to worship the image. I'm sorry? And ultimately, the mark on the right hand and on the forehead, that is the number of the beast, number of his name, or the number 666 is another. It says the name of the beast or the number of his name is what it says. The name of the beast or the number of his name is this mark. And he has the ability to make sure that if you don't get this mark, you can't buy or sell. This is huge authority. This is a vast authority, right? And he has this authority. He performs it in the presence. He also can do signs and wonders. And with those, he deceives the nations, right? Okay. The authority is given to the beast. I'm backing up a little bit. The authority is over every tribe, every people, every tongue, and every nation that's given to this beast. And to war with the saints and to overcome them. Okay, it says it was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Does it say he overcomes them? It says it was given to him to do that task. Okay, and then it says, because we've already seen they overcome the dragon, the saints do, when you look back at chapter 12. Okay, so, but it might mean that they're killed. And then it says he has the authority. Okay, so what limits are there to his authority? How geographically limited is he? It's worldwide. Worldwide, right? He has that authority. You can just see it growing and all of that. He speaks these arrogant words and blasphemies, and he has this authority to act for 42 months. Okay, stop for a second. He has the authority to act for 42 months. If this beast is the beast of chapter 11, when did that start?
When the two witnesses were on.
Okay, because they basically had authority to this point. So when would this time clock start, do you think? Go in this direction, right? Okay, so if we're going to put the 42 months, and I'm just going to put beast beside it, because it's this one. Put it on there, right? Are we confident of that? I don't want to tell you something, but does that make sense? If you're connecting these persons, you've got the two witnesses talking up to this point, then you have a beast coming on the scene, and he does away with them. And then we've got chapter 12 and the events that are happening with chapter 12 with the dragon being thrown out of heaven and being thrown to earth. When does the dragon get thrown to the earth? At this point. And that's when he empowers the beast. And now the beast starts acting for 42 months going in this direction, right? So this is how many years?
3.5.
This is how many years?
3.5.
Just 7 years.
But we don't have that in Revelation. But right, it adds up to 7 years. There's nothing wrong with adding the numbers up. Okay. So also, this woman's time frame, if she flees and the dragon goes off after her, when is her time frame for this? It's where though? Which side? It's on this side. Okay. So you've got the beast and the woman's time frame and hers is the 1260, and I'm gonna say, the T's, the time, and half time frame, is also this time frame of what we hear in chapter 12. Okay? When is the holy city trodden for 42 months? I can't put that one on there yet. Okay, but we can mark this one off. The other thing that you can know is in chapter 12 that there is going to be a mark. Okay, when does that start? Maybe it starts here because that's when his practices are. Can it have started back here? I'm not as certain of that yet, but it doesn't seem to be until here, or at least starting. Like the mark of the beast might be in this time frame. Okay, let's move on. In chapter 14, we have the 144,000 described, and where are they?
Heaven.
They're in heaven now. So you've got somewhere around here, I'm going to erase this because I wanted to put that up here. We got our sticky notes still up there marked off. But you've got the 144,000 at some point in heaven now. Now you had them, the 144,000 here on earth, but now we've got them, and I'm going to put them in a cloud. We got the 144,000 sometime in this time frame up in heaven. It's got to be after here. Okay, and then we've got these angels. The first angel says, has an eternal gospel to preach in the mid-heaven, and he's preaching to the earth dwellers, and he says, fear God and give him glory because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens and the earth and the sea and the springs and waters of life. Let's just stop for a second. This angel in mid-heaven is telling the earth dwellers to worship the one that made everything. What did we see in chapter 13? Those earth dwellers are worshiping what?
The image.
They're worshiping the image. They're worshiping the beast. They're worshiping the dragon. They're not worshiping the God in heaven that made the heavens and the earth. But that's the eternal gospel that's preached by an angel. And then it says, fallen is Babylon the Great. This is not when that's happening. This is an angel that's declaring this, fallen. The third angel says, if anyone takes the mark and worships the beast in his image, he will drink of the wine of the wrath of God. That's not a good thing. Right? Which is mixed in full. And he'll be tormented. This is an interesting little point. He, the one who has taken the mark, the one who's going to drink of the wrath of God, in verse 10 if you're looking for it, he'll be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Have you ever thought of that? That judgment, that torment of fire and brimstone is going to be in the presence of the Lamb and his holy angels? It's not something we tend to think about, right? But it's there. The smoke of their torment goes up how long? Forever and ever. They have no rest day and night. Those who worship the beast and his image and whoever receives the mark. Okay, if you didn't get it, that other verse, you get it again. If you worship the beast. And these things are tied together. You can't just worship the beast and not take the mark. If you worship the beast, you're going to take the mark. If you've got the mark, you're going to worship the beast. It's all tied together. Okay? And it says, here's the perseverance of the saints who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. We saw that here's the perseverance of the saints phrase before. It's interesting. But here's the perseverance of the saints who keep. What is here is the perseverance. The fact that those who take the mark and those who worship the beast are going to be tormented with fire and brimstone forever in the presence of Jesus and his angels. That preserves us. That helps us. No, doesn't preserve us. It helps us persevere. Does that help you persevere? Okay. If you were on earth and had to take the mark to be able to buy or sell, but you were a saint and you refused to take the mark, do you need something that will help you persevere?
Yes.
Yeah. And here it is. The outcome of taking that mark is not something we can be light about. And that's our message today, to tell people, don't take the mark. You can't take the mark. But it's going to mean starvation, or being killed by the image, or being called out by the image to be killed, right? We've got souls under the altar who are beheaded.
Right.
We've got the great multitude whose number has not been complete, the souls' number has not been complete. We've got the great multitude who are going to be killed during this time because of their testimony. Do they need to have this message of perseverance? That's the perseverance it's talking about.
What's
And-
happening today is by them picking away at everything, all the things we
Right.
believe in, and,
Here in America, we're losing our comfort, not yet life normally, but in the world, there are many that are losing their lives. I mean, we've heard those stories on the news recently of children being beheaded in parks in, was it Iraq? Where, because they're Christians, because their parents are Christians at least, and they wouldn't, as children, deny Jesus. If they would have assimilated, they would live. If the women would assimilate, they'd just get another husband, they'd be given to a man as a husband, their life would be horrible, but they would live. Do we need perseverance? Yeah. It's not come to America yet, but it's coming to America, in my opinion. Okay. Then it says in verse 13, blessed are those who die from now on in the Lord, from now on. Are people going to die? Yeah. Okay, that's what it's telling us. Yes, says the Spirit, and the rest of their, and they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow with them. It says, and I looked, and there was a white cloud, and sitting on the cloud was one like a son of man, having a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hands. And there's another angel that came out and says, put your sickle in and reap, because the hour to reap has come, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. Normally, when you have the picture of a sickle and harvest, it's a picture of harvest. That's a positive thing. If you're harvesting something, you want that thing, right? You want the wheat that's in the field. You want the grass for your cattle. We don't normally use a sickle now, but it's that idea, right? So this harvest is a harvest, and it says the earth is ripe. What does that tell you is going to be going on during this time frame if this is a positive harvest? There's people being saved. Okay? And he's told to reap from the earth, so those people are going to be taken from the earth in that sense, right? There's a harvest there. And then it says, another angel came out of the temple, which is in heaven, and he also had a sharp sickle. And another angel, the one with the power over fire, came out, and he called with a loud voice to the one with the sharp sickle. This is the second angel with the sickle. I mean, this is a second personage with a sickle. And it says, he says to gather the clusters from the vine of the earth. It doesn't say harvest. It says, gather the clusters from the vine, because her grapes are ripe. And the angel swung his sickle on the earth, and he gathered the clusters from the vine of the earth, and he threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. Not a good thing. So it appears there is a good harvest with the first one, like the Son of Man, and there is a bad harvest with the second one, and it says the winepress was trodden outside the city, and the blood came up from the winepress to the horses' bridles for a distance of 200 miles. So what is this wine, what are these grapes that are being harvested? Are they really grapes? No, because it's blood. They're humans. Okay, so then you've got 15. You've got the 7 bowls, the 7 angels with the 7 bowls. So you've got, still in here, you've got the 7 angels getting 7 bowls. And then in 16, you have all 7. Okay, this is in chapter, what did I just say, 15. And these are all in chapter 16, which is the last chapter. And one right after the other, all the things that happen as a result of these bowls. But I was trying to remember, it's always kind of fun to try to remember how we can remember these things. Remember in chapter 6, we had 6 seals. On chapter 16, 1 and 6, we have 7 bowls. Remember in chapter 11, 1 and 1, we have 2 witnesses. Yeah. So sometimes I just have to do these visuals that help me. So you've got the 7 bowls poured out here. And I'm not going to write all that down because we really are going long on our time. But you see, that's the end of what we're looking at. The next chapter is going to be the next in the Spirit experience by John when we get to 17. But we've got some things that we have been able to set in time. Not everything. And we'll look over time and see if we're right about this as we continue in our study. Can we divide this up at this point when the mystery of God is about to happen? When the mystery of God, at the end of the sixth trumpet, where the 6-second woe is past, we go backwards in time, 1260 days. I just don't know how far over it goes. Does it cover this whole board? Or does it stop somewhere before that? Do events happen before that 1260 days? We can't say, but we know when it ends. And we know things shift and change after that, because now the salvation comes. Now, things are different. Now the mystery of God is going to be finished in the rest of this. The angels are given their 7 bowls. We're trying to put those things in time. So we'll end here. We'll continue on your studies next week. If you didn't get a chance to fill out your pages, go back and do some of that. There'll be a good time to do that. And you'll be adding to these pages, because we're going to see the beast. We're going to see the dragon. We're going to see a different woman. You can add more pages if you want to add more persons to your list and all too. But did you see that focusing on the details of some of those persons started helping you see things are starting to fit together? Okay. One other point is when we focused on the beast and we focused on verses 3, 12, and 14 and talked about his wound, that he died and his wound would heal, right? Where might he come out of when he comes back to life? Where might he have gone when he died? Hades, the tomb, the abyss. So coming out of the abyss might be that idea in chapter 11 of why it says a beast that came out of the abyss. So maybe at this point, that wounding and death and resurrection comes back here prior to him going forward, because it's at the point that he kills the 2 witnesses that he suddenly comes on the scene in power, but he exists before that. And the whole world marvels at the fact that he can kill the 2 witnesses, and then the dragon gives his power. So don't get the chapters necessarily that come after mixed up so much. But it's just, how do these things happen? We're not exactly sure about all of them. What can we know? What can we put on here? And be flexible enough to erase and redraw if we have to. But we're going to try. We have to kind of leave some things up in sticky notes that we can't quite put there yet. Okay, we'll end and we'll listen. We'll get our food and we'll watch the video. Father in heaven,